What is up guys, Morton here from SteamFirst.com with a review for Cypress Inheritance, The Beginning, developed by Cypress Inheritance and published March 10th, 2014 on Steam for $30. Cypress Inheritance, The Beginning is part 1 of a 3-part open-world action-adventure RPG with parts 2 and 3 coming in April and August respectively. It's worth noting that you get parts 2 and 3 for free if you purchase part 1. So for $30 you do get all 3 parts, which is good because after playing part 1 there's no way you'd waste more money on this game. Oops, that's kind of my whole summary of Cypress Inheritance in one line. I feel I need to point out that I didn't play this game all the way until the end. I tried my best to do so, but it's just, well, you'll see. Let's dive into this review with the only positive thing I can say about this game. The soundtrack is really well done. Soundtracks are pretty hard to do in my opinion, because you don't want them to be so obnoxious that you notice it non-stop, but you still want it to add to the game. And I think the soundtrack in Cypress Inheritance does just that. It's good enough to be noticed, but not jarring or annoying to listen to. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for the rest of the sounds. If you want to hear some of the dialogue, you better turn your volume all the way up. But if you get on an ATV, you'll probably blow your eardrums out. The noises aren't equalized at all. Some things like ATVs and a waterfall in particular are absurdly loud, while voices are really quiet. It was very annoying having to choose between going deaf or being able to hear the main character talk. The sound gets a 2 out of 5. The soundtrack is really quite good, but the fact that all the other sounds are so disorienting really ruins things. Unfortunately, there isn't much to ruin, because the whole game is kind of a mess. I know sound is an odd thing to start with. Story or gameplay would normally come first, because those are bigger parts of the game, but I wanted to start with something positive, and that was actually the only positive part of the experience. The gameplay is a disaster. It boasts about being an open-world stealth action-adventure RPG, and it's mentioned multiple times on their Steam page that there isn't a tutorial. And that's fine, there are plenty of games that are open world with no tutorial or map or anything. Dark Souls, for example, does it well, but Cypress Inheritance does not. The controls are all basically what you'd expect, except half of them aren't hotkeyed. Moving is WASD, shooting is left click, aim with mouse, etc. But things that this game has that others don't, such as cloaking or the ability to make your ATV engine quiet, don't get hotkeys. Oh, you want to cloak? Well, first you have to open your wrist device, and then you have to click the button that says cloak. And to open the wrist device you have to press P, and let me tell you, when you move with WASD and need the other hand on the mouse, P is not a convenient button to click, especially considering when you open the wrist device it doesn't pause the game. Which I guess wouldn't be terrible if the AI wasn't so atrocious, but it is, more on that later. Anyway, there's no reason that they couldn't have hotkeyed all the abilities in this game. There really aren't that many, but they chose not to for whatever reason, and it makes it incredibly clunky. There are no weapons other than stun guns, which get 5 shots each, and once you run out of shots you have to find a new gun. This would be okay if there were crosshairs or something to help you aim, but there aren't, so it takes at least 1 or 2 shots just to figure out where you're shooting before you can actually hit the enemy. So each gun's probably only going to stun 2 enemies at most, maybe 3. In theory this should be okay though, because the stealth aspect means you aren't going to be fighting people from range. You're supposed to cloak or crouch and stay in the shadows and get close to the people, and then either avoid them or stun them, depending on the situation. And this might just be the most broken part of the entire game. Enemies can see you from across the map while you're in complete darkness, they can see through walls, but then other times you can stand directly in front of them and they don't notice. Sometimes they chase you forever, sometimes they give up after you turn one corner. It's completely inconsistent. Look at this. This guy is stuck on this small rock. Not only can he not walk forward, but he's shooting into the ground with me right in front of him. Then he just randomly forgets I'm there, turns around and walks away. And this is what the entire game is like. Apparently in here I can walk through walls. I don't know, they forgot to add hit detection to this? There's multiple spots where this happens. It just feels terribly unpolished and unfinished. Since everyone uses stun guns, there's no dying. If you touch an enemy, and you will because you'll get stunned and they'll walk into you, then you get sent to a prison on the island. Now you'd think a prison would have a lot of guards, and also not have a lot of stun guns lying around, but apparently this one has very few guards, and quite a lot of stun guns. That being said, it's incredibly annoying. If you use a gun and run out of shots, and then later get touched by a guard and sent back, the gun doesn't respawn. So now you get to try again, but this time you can't stun anyone, and you just have to run past them. But since they chase you forever, eventually you'll get caught. So you need to track down another gun quickly. Unfortunately, there aren't as many as necessary, especially if you die multiple times in a row. If you do find one, good luck picking it up while you're being chased. The grab mechanic is beyond awful. You slowly reach out and attempt to grab something in front of you. But it has the same issue as aiming. It takes multiple tries just to grab the item you want, and stun guns aren't just lying out in the open. You have to find the containers and open them by standing in front of a motion sensor, and if you move too far, it closes. So yeah, if you're being chased, you might as well keep running, or just turn around and let them catch you because you'll never outrun them. A lot of time is spent just wandering around. Without a map or any objectives other than find hidden things, it's impossible to know where to go. So you'll walk all over looking for something until an enemy spots you from across the island and chases you. Then you get locked up again, and by the time you get out, you'll have no idea how to get back to where you were. You have to move slowly everywhere you go because of the AI's absurd detection range. But since they can see through walls, you'll probably get detected by someone you can't see until it's too late. The gameplay gets a 1 out of 5. The AI flat out doesn't work. There are tons of bugs with clipping and just walking through what should be solid objects. The only reason it doesn't get a 0 is because the controls work. The controls are terrible, don't get me wrong, half the skills aren't hotkeyed, but they work, and I'm really just trying my best to find anything remotely good about this game. The story has to do with you being adopted and going to this island because a mysterious stranger told you that you can learn about your past and your real family there. Presumably this happens and you figure everything out, but I wouldn't know, and honestly I don't care to know. There's nothing interesting about Lorna Written, the main character. There's a quick 10-minute or so intro to the story where a guy you've never met before tells you to go risk your life on an island that's going to blow up in 72 hours, and then through a series of cutscenes you get there, and that's about it for an intro story. And up until the point where I quit, that was about it as far as story goes. You'll learn a little more here and there, but it's so spread out and uninteresting that I really couldn't care less. They talk about multiple endings and replayability. I wouldn't know, and I don't care about this girl at all, so her story doesn't matter. Up to the point I got, I'd give the story a 1. It doesn't draw you in at all, and it doesn't make you feel like you matter since everything is just read off to you. It's honestly one of the biggest gaming disappointments I've had in a long time. It looked so good. Just take a look at the Steam page for this game. It sounds interesting, fun, and challenging, and it's just none of those things. I really wanted Cypress Inheritance to be good. Reading about it made me excited to play it. An open-world exploration RPG, where there's a lot of replayability and a heavy focus on stealth. But the lack of a map or any objectives just makes it into a giant game of hide-and-seek, and the broken AI makes going anywhere take forever. There are plenty of open-world games, Prototype, Grand Theft Auto, etc., and they work fine. Even games like Dark Souls, where they don't have objectives laid out on a map, work well too. But they tell you what you're doing. In Cypress Inheritance, I'm wandering around this giant island, avoiding enemies that can see me from miles away, trying to find something I've only ever seen in the manual. Speaking of the manual, it's kind of useless. They say there's no tutorial and you need the manual to learn the game, but really, you'll learn everything just by playing for about 5 minutes, so it's hardly worth looking at. It'd be nice if the manual gave you some sort of a clue as to where to go, or just a basic map of the island. It doesn't have to point out where everything is, but the entire island looks basically the same, so differentiating one location from another is almost impossible without a map, especially when you just appear in random places after you escape from the cell you get locked up in. Overall, Cypress Inheritance The Beginning is a 1 out of 5. The pace is absurdly slow and boring, with it taking forever to do anything because the AI of the enemies is so terrible you never know when you'll be shot from a mile away. The controls are super annoying, having to constantly open your wrist device to use half the abilities because they couldn't be asked to give them hotkeys. The story is uninteresting and basically just read to you. But I think my biggest complaint about this game is the fact that it failed to be everything it claimed, and was just a massive disappointment. If there's ever a day where they patch this game and fix the AI, add hotkeys for all the controls, fix the crashes, I didn't mention crashes, but it crashed quite a few times, and improve performance so it's possible to get over 20 FPS, then perhaps this game would be worth another look. Until all that happens, you're better off staying far away from this.